This video is about how I put USB-C in Vita 1000s. It can be a 3G or a regular Wi-Fi 1000. We are going to need a few things. First, a PS Vita original cable, a USB 2.0 port with its pins exposed. You need a special USB-C Breakout Board. Special by that it has 5.1K ohm resistors, pulling CC1 and CC2 down to ground. Some chargers look for this handshake to provide 5 volts at higher amps. We are going to need a sponge with a little water, something to wipe the solder off the iron, a fine tip soldering iron tip. You will also need a soldering iron that can reach high temperatures and that you can set to a nice high temperature. Might sound high, but I recommend 400 centigrade. Flux, you can use wet flux. I'm using paste for this. Razor blade. I highly recommend a Dremel tool. Going to need some wire strippers. Some precision cutters for plastic and wires. I'm using 26 gauge for red and black, lighter for the white and green, and leaded solder. You need a multimeter or something that can check continuity. A fine felt tip pen for marking where to cut. Fine tip tweezers. I highly recommend using some sort of magnification. I'll be using a microscope for this video. Finally, that Phillips number 00 for tearing the Vita down. For red and blue 3G, you will need a special screwdriver to remove the 3G module. I'll show that later. 4 screws on the back, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom. Check all the bays, memory card, game slot, 3G if you're in a 3G, make sure they're empty. Also tap the power button to make sure that the Vita itself is off. If not, then turn it off. I like to pull open behind the left trigger. Be very gentle as you pull away the back, as it's connected on the bottom. Open like a clamshell with the hinge at the bottom. Lift up first with your fingernail on the touchscreen connector. And then I brace my thumb on the board here and pull up on the power cable. Alright, I specifically want mine over here. I will be putting a USB bay in it later, so I'm just making sure there's room. You don't need to do this step. Just making sure there's room for when I add this later. Because of where I want this, I need to cut off this 3G area of the left controller board. This isn't used for anything else. And now to continue with the disassembly. These are 3G wires. I pull them off with my fingernails and then pull them free. The red and blue 3G have 2 less wires than the other colors. Just make sure to pull them all. Once all of the wires are free, you can lift the whole plastic bracket by pulling one of the clips on the left or right with your screwdriver. All of the wires that are attached to the bracket come with it. On a white or black 3G, you can remove the 3G module using the same screwdriver. However, with the red and blue, they have these special star shape. Those are called Torx screws, and this is a Torx 2 to be specific. You either need to buy one of these or remove this card forcefully. I go into detail on that a little deeper on the 3G to Wi-Fi conversion video. If you do have Torx 2, be sure to push it in all the way before spinning. I'm not going to put the module back in because it just drains the battery. I also won't be putting the SIM tray card holder back, but I may want to keep this for mounting something else there later. It just has those 2 plastic clips and the ribbon cable. L&R triggers and their holding brackets. Sorry that I cover this with my hand, but then you just pull the bay doors off the top of the Vita by grabbing their rubber legs. And they just pop off. They pop right back on too. Lifting the clip on the power cable and then pulling it out using a screwdriver. Same with the L trigger, popping it open, pulling it free with a screwdriver, and then finally that right trigger. Time to remove the grounding plates that connect the basic ground to the motherboard to the controller sides. We aren't going to put the big one on the bottom back on because we're going to be cutting away the rest of that board, but it's going to be fine because it has that huge grounding plane above. Also, the ground does go back on the flex cable. The reason that grounding plate is so huge is for the 3G actually. A lot of regular Wi-Fi models don't have that plate. After you unclip this flex cable, it lifts on the controller side. Same with the other one. Just unclip them both and then it lifts on the controller side. It's because it has those teeth on the side, and then it pulls out from the motherboard. So you lift from the controller side, which is the outer side, and then you pull free from the motherboard side. Another grounding plate. These are great for stability too. Alright, pull the camera forward, but be gentle, don't fold it. It can't really be unfolded if you fold it, so don't fold it. Behind it is a screw. When you remove that, the whole bracket will come off. Just lift away from the board. Again, careful with the camera. The camera latch also opens. The camera itself is glued to the board. Be very careful pulling it away as you don't want to fold it. But with that door open on the bracket, it will come right out. The joystick clip, make sure to take the belt out before you remove the board. Unlike me, I skipped that on accident. Get the belt out of the clip. This turned out okay, luckily, but never pull very hard because you can miss some things on accident. I like to pull this camera forward because it can get stuck if you pull the motherboard out first, so I just pull that out. It is kind of glued in there on some models too. The motherboard has a clip here, here, and one over on the side here. Once those are all pulled back, it will come forward. I pull at the port. Once loose, it will open like a clamshell again. Just be careful, that flex cable is attached for the display. Open it slowly and then get your fingernail in there and pull it free. We do want to keep these thermal pads, so let's just put them on the screen side. Alright, the left controller board. So lift the joystick flex connector open, then push at the tabs with a screwdriver until it's free of the connector. And then again, just a couple clips holding it in. First part of the mod for me is removing that 3G area on this board. I'm going to do so with the razor blade. Just cutting along the line, long and boring. Try to speed it up here for you. There's a hole right next to where I'm cutting in here. That hole I like because it adds stability to the controller board on the faceplate side. When I set it back on there, it's just a post. Sits right on that hole. I mean, that's it for this, so let's just put it back in. Alright, here is my 3G Red 1000 board. We're going to be going at the port here. For 5 volt in, we want to attach to this fuse. This is a ground pad right here. This can be a black wire. Only these two are required if you want to just do power. If you want to do data, you got to do 2 more. Teeny little pins right here. Top one is D negative, bottom is D positive. All of that is fragile, so we're going to be doing a more difficult solder, but protects the board by attaching directly to the port's pins. So those lead right to those pins up there. I don't really like the red or blue motherboard, so I'm going to switch to a regular 3G board. I suggest you buy a board as well. They're pretty cheap on AliExpress, and if you mess up, it's not your board. This is the red-blue motherboard port under a microscope. See the pins that aren't connected up there? And this is a regular board. This is the one that we're going to be soldering to today. So the furthest left is where we're attaching the green wire, which is data plus. I'm going to color code the wires. Pre-tin these wires, that's where all the tin is going to come from. It's going to come in on the wire. Either have the whole area wet with flux or have the wire coated in flux as well. You want to warm the board as much as you can before bringing the wire in. After the soldering section, I show continuity testing, but you actually want to be testing continuity after you add each wire. And if you ever fail the continuity test, you need to pull that wire back off, clean it, and try again until you get the wire on the pin, test the continuity, and it passes. Here I'm struggling to even get the whole area warm enough. I do need to add more flux, which I'm about to, but I'm really trying to get this nice and hot and in the corner. If it's in the corner, it gives me more room for the next pin, for the data minus pin, for the white wire. Now that I got it where I want it, I'll add some more flux here to get the tin wet and hopefully fuse the wire to the pin. Stay on here a while and get that really hot. You'll see the tin in the wire turn to liquid. If you see that flow onto the pin, you're lucky that you saw it for one, but then you know you did it right. I get this hot over and over again until I see it wet. I never see it flow onto the pin just because the area is so small. And because of that, when I'm done, I tug on the wire pretty hard. Alright, here's the hardest part, the data minus, because it's so close to the data plus. The next one over is also a ground pin, so you got to get right between these two. Come in tinned, of course, coated in flux. I probably should have had even more flux down already. Should get the whole area hot and maybe have the whole area wet with flux would have helped as well. But just coming on the top here with a very tinned wire, stay on there for a long time. Make sure it gets a lot of heat, a lot of flux, and of course, when you're done, tug and test the continuity. The second wire usually takes me a few attempts because of its location between two pins. This is my first time with a microscope and I got lucky. Passed the continuity test first try on the white one. With a lot of fluxes, you need to clean your environment, some rubbing alcohol on a Q-tip. It also is kind of nice as it checks your how good your solder points are. Kind of pull on the wires just a little bit gently. That rubbing alcohol will get rid of the flux, so sometimes the flux will stick it. And just cleaning it will show you don't have a good bond, and thus you need to solder it again. So it kind of proves you a little bit, like to shove a Q-tip in there to make sure the solder point is strong. It's important to clean up your flux with rubbing alcohol though. Dirty pads do not solder well. Pins, rather. Alright, so the first two wires are green, then white. Then you skip one because that's ground. And then I'm heating up the next two wires there, or the next two pins. Definitely twist that thicker gauge red wire, that 26 gauge, because it's hard to keep it small enough to fit in this space. Heat the whole area really well and then try to set it between those two pins and get everything real hot. My iron isn't hot enough at this point. I'm using 380 C to try to get it hot enough. Possible at that temperature, but you really got to keep it on there for a long time. With that failed first attempt, it looked like I bridged those pins there. So I come in with the iron just to heat everything up to see what's going on. And it was actually just some dirty flux. So I added some more flux to get the whole area wet. See if I can't see those pins shiny. And there they go, pretty shiny again, ready to be soldered to. I quick check the continuity again, which you'll see after this, to make sure that none of the wires are bridged. Just be very patient. Sometimes this can take a lot of attempts, but you can always clean and try again as long as you're working on the pins. Time for another attempt on the cleaned pins. Just sit down right between them. The whole area is wet with flux. I brought more flux in on the wire as well. Just stay on it a long time till you see the tin in the wire get wet and kind of flow away. It is so small that it is hard to stay still. Patience. I was not patient enough here. But as soon as I saw it start to flow, so here I brought it up to the temperature where it's kind of putty-like. It's a little more malleable. I felt like maybe I got it, but I didn't. Gave it a little tug, passed that test, then I clean it. And it comes right off. Now it did have a little connection. You see that silver up there? It was a little bit connected, but not fully fused. This can happen a few times. Don't get discouraged, just be very patient, clean, and try again. Always remember to check for continuity issues between soldering. This is about getting to that dirty point where I kind of want to pull the wires free and start again, clean the whole area, and try from scratch. I give myself one more try. I turn the iron up to 420 centigrade just to see if I couldn't get the solder to flow a little better. The hot solder with plenty of flux would get the board hot pretty quick too, and that might give me a good chance of getting a good connection. So that's what I try next. Newly tinned and fluxed wire. Bringing it in again, same wire, just re-tinned and refluxed. And then again, a really hot soldering iron. See if I can't get this a good fuse because it's my last wire. Otherwise, I'm going to want to clean the whole area. And start from scratch. But luckily this one does work, and it does pass the stress and continuity test. Alright, see the solder turn to liquid right here. Okay, gotta do it a little longer than that. But it did get it hot enough, so I just gotta keep it liquid right on those pins long enough for the flux to combine the pins with the solder. Tin is wet again, and then keep it on here for a while until the whole area is hot. Alright, then I tug, and it is stuck. I do the black wire real quick, and then I clean up the whole thing, and it passed the continuity, the pulling on, and the cleaning test, finally. Last wire is the black wire, the ground wire. You can connect that right to the side of the port. You could also connect to a grounding pad if you prefer, but I just find this so easy. Just get it super hot, add a bunch of flux, add the wire to it. It looks messy, but it's just super easy. Get it hot enough to stick the tin, some of the tin, to the side of the port, then it'll be easy to solder to. Then come in with the very tinned ground wire with plenty of flux on it, and get that whole area real hot. Slides right in. Alright, I do some off-camera cleanup, but now it's time to show the continuity test. Do this in between each solder so you know if you need to remove that wire you just added, clean up, and try that wire again. Work on each wire one by one until you make it through with each one passing the continuity test. Plug the USB cable into the board and then attach the USB bay. If you hear that sound, you have continuity. None of these pins should have continuity with each other, so you touch each pin with both probes and none of them should sound. Test this after you solder each wire to each pin. Same thing goes for the wires that you are attaching. They should not have continuity with each other. This is the sound if you have continuity. They are touching. Okay. None of these wires should be touching on the inside, so they should not make that sound if you touch two of them at the same time. So make sure that they don't. Just go through them all. If they do, you have a short and you need to redo those wires. Well, these wires should have some continuity to some spots on this. So red should have continuity with this pad. That means the red can charge the Vita if it can beat this pad. Black should beat the casing, of course. Also this pad. The data pins are a little easier if they don't have continuity between the two, if they don't beep when you touch both wires, and they make this spot beep, you know that you've got them right. Same with this spot to the left. If you can make this spot over here beep, and the two wires do not have continuity together, yet both wires make this spot beep, you know you've got them right. No continuity together. Hard part done. Purely optional, here I show adding a little epoxy to the wires so that they stick to the board. I don't cover any components, it's just to make sure that the wires, if anything pulls on them, they pull on the epoxy and not on my solder. A tiny amount, but again, totally optional. I suggest your USB-C Breakout has an overhang lip so it'll peek through the case. Mark out with that felt pen wherever you want your breakout board to fit. Do it on the outside of the case too. Where you need to cut. Mark on the inside because you want to remove that mark completely, but just some visual aid so you don't go cutting where you don't want to, and so you're brave enough to cut. Remove that so it's not in the way. Time for cutting super speed and Dremel. When cutting out the port spot, I highly suggest approaching the black line and then cutting that piece of plastic free. And then again, approaching the line and then cutting that piece of plastic free. And kind of doing that on both sides so you don't cut more plastic than you want. Do this very slowly. Do that wiggling that I did to kind of give you a little step forward, a little step forward. This can take a while if you don't want to ruin your casing. And with the Dremel, we're going all the way through the plastic. There is a piece of tin back there holding the screen, so just remember to approach it and then remove the plastic away. There is another belt down there too, so just be very careful and slow and observant. I highly suggest setting this into the front screen like this so that it has a lot of, you can push it really hard when you insert the USB-C. Okay, there's a lot of plastic under the motherboard too that needs to allow the wires to go through. Try to leave the one screw hole like I do so you can screw the motherboard to it. Alright, line up the board on the top and open clamshell. It has this nice little tab for you to hold onto so you can push the adapter in. So convenient. Careful when closing, you go behind this belt and get the camera in its hole. Don't push hard, kind of feel where the wires go, and if it doesn't quite fit, you need to open it back up and grind some more plastic away. And mine didn't quite fit. Luckily, I don't have to take it completely off. I just gotta move some right here. And now it fits. I just screw it down for stability. I should have probably left some of the plastic behind it to brace, but I decided to remove it to make room for the wires. So here I go removing all the plastic behind it. Since the bottom of the adapter will be touching the tin insulation, I need to keep it from grounding out on it. So I'm putting some electrical tape behind it. Alright, measure the wires and cut them to length. I'm going a little long because I want to add that other mod in the future. So I want to give myself a little room to move things if I need to. Tinning these wires doesn't seem that important, but the nice thing about it is it keeps stray wires from going anywhere else when you shove it through the hole. So I like to tin these first, then shove it through the hole, heat the hole up with the wire in it, and that heats the wire up as well. So I just shove the wire in the hole, shove the soldering iron in the hole with it, and then push some solder in there. And this is kind of the suggested way of doing through holes. Much easier than soldering to the motherboard, that's for sure. Do that with all 4 wires. The green wire is data plus or D plus. The white wire is data minus or D minus. The red one is VCC, V bus, or 5 volt. And then the black one is ground. I'm just adding a little electric tape to keep everything out of the way. It's not necessary for anything. Time to reassemble, so let's get that left board back in. I do the ground plate right away to get a screw in it so it doesn't go anywhere. It's its only screw now, but it does have another clip. And then the screws from the back hold it in pretty securely. Here's the left stick, open the latch. Get it in there, push the tabs on the side of it to get it in with the door wide open. It won't go in if the door is anywhere closed. And then same with the trigger. Make sure the camera is all the way in. If not, you can use a screwdriver to get it in the rest of the way. The R board has a little latch you gotta get it under, a little piece of plastic before you clamp it down. You can break the board if you do straight from above. Get it under that lip and then push it down. And then the R board flex cables, the R trigger here, door all the way up, and then the R stick, door all the way up, and then use the tabs to push it in. Ground plates. The controller flex cables have teeth on them, these little notches. Those go in the controller side of the board. They give it a big grip on it, you close it, and then you feed the other side into the clip on the motherboard side. Controller side first with the teeth, and then it slips in on the motherboard. Tiny power button flex cable, door open, push in, pretty simple. Just make sure they are all in all the way without forcing. R board, same thing, teeth first, that'll give it a good grip, and never pull that out. And then on the motherboard side, slip it in. I like to lift it up so that I can bend it to get it in there, make sure the door is all the way open. And then once you find the hole, it slides in pretty easy. Door all the way open. Camera mount falls apart pretty easy. This metal piece grounds the camera, goes on this plastic mount like that with a black screw. Has a little leg that sticks into the board on the left before you screw it in. These doors really just pop off and pop on. Just remember to get them in there. Don't bend the camera when reinserting. It's far more rigid than the other cables. If you fold it, it could break on its first fold. Tabs on the sides help with the screwdriver. Sorry about the out of focus, but they can help you push it in. It's weird how the camera mounts. Just push from the right and it goes in. The triggers first, and then they each have a little mounting piece. Try not to lose those, they're a pain in the butt to replace. I'm lining up the back with the front here so that I can see where the USB-C needs to still fit through the back of the case so that I can mark where to cut it out. I'm using a Dremel to make it easy. So since I switched motherboards, the red and blue Vita both have a different battery clip. So I need to use a different battery or add the other battery clip to this battery. Well, I have another battery, so I'm going to use it. It's not the best battery, but it fits. So I'm just going to attach it for this video and assume you have your own battery. Rear touchpad, just line it up over the top and push down squarely on it. I mean, basically the same for the power one, except for you kind of push from the bottom. Closing the case is reverse as opening. Bottom goes together first and top follows. Makes it pretty easy. We're not done, we still have to brace the USB. If you try to plug it in right now, the USB will just fly around inside the case. So we need to secure it. You can just glue it to the case, but we're gonna push on it from the other side. I'm putting the 3G antenna back in. I'm going to need to remove a little plastic here. Wi-Fi's will be fine here. There's just some plastic that can push against it. Or you can fill that in with something else. All I need to do is wedge it up against the screen so that it stays in that divot, and when you push, it pushes against the screen, so it's braced to the screen. So all I'm doing is chopping up some popsicle sticks and wrapping them with electrical tape and shoving it in there so that that little wedge that I create holds it in that hole, and that hole itself is secure. I can push against that and the USB is solid. You can just epoxy it into the hole. I'm doing it this way so that I could always replace the part or move it if I wanted to use the hole for something else. But epoxying it to the front panel is totally an option, epoxying it into that hole. Trying to wrap it tightly. Sorry this is taking so long. I just wanted to make sure you saw what I did. So the wedge is a little big, but this I can deal with. I can just kind of grind the plastic a little bit, get it a little deeper until it holds the USB firmly in place. I actually had to do a little more after the video because it still kind of kept the case open just a tad. You want that to fit as perfect as you can if you're just going to wedge it like I am. And now that USB can take a very firm push with the USB-C cable, which I really like about USB-C. You can just push it in either direction and it should feel very solid, and this does. Not gonna break. Two silver screws on the top, two silver screws on the bottom, 4 black screws on the back. These screws are just metal into plastic, so don't over tighten them or they'll never be able to tighten again. You can actually solve that if you put epoxy in the screw hole and then drill it out and then put a screw back in it. The two in the top. Alright, to show function, I'm going to use Vita shell and Windows 7. I open Vita shell and turn on USB connection. First the proprietary cable to show that it still works, regular USB, and connect it up to the Vita. So that still works. USB-C to USB-C. This is all pins. This is a Samsung data transfer. Right to a full USB-C on a laptop, and that works. It's only going to be USB 2 speeds, of course. It's not high speed at all. USB-C to USB 3.0. To a USB 3.1 port on the computer. In Vita shell, sorry, here we go. So that works. Okay, this is USB-C going into a quick charger. This is Qualcomm quick charge. I don't know what version, but it doesn't matter. It just stays at the 5 volts, so it's fine to charge a Vita in a Qualcomm quick charger. Now this is USB-C to USB-C going into USB PD power delivery. This is for all USB-C quick chargers. Those won't work unless you have an adapter with some USB cords, but that should work because we got the 5.1k ohm resistors attached. And yeah, that makes the handshake and tells it to send 5 volts and up to 3 amps. And then finally the original Sony adapter, Sony brick. that still works with the original cable. So everything still works. Added USB-C, and I can use any charger since I used the breakout board with the 5.1K resistors. I'm about to notice there's a little teeny gap in the case here. After the video, I go back and grind that area down a little bit again.